One Man's Trash is a dig-em-up that has you digging for your legally distinct from Bitcoin crypto wallet. It comes out on the PC, specifically for Steam, and releases today, July 23rd, 2025, for the price of $6.48? Mind you, this is the US price. It should be a more normal price for European countries based on exchange rates, as the dev is from Europe. But it will also be 20% off its first week. So that's nice. But before I begin this review, this key was obtained from the PR for review purposes. That won't change my opinion of the game in the end, but you should know that because of FTC guidelines, as well as the whole morals thing, you know? Let's start with why you're probably here, the gameplay. The basic setup for the game is that you have a $100 million crypto wallet on a hard drive that you accidentally threw into a landfill because you're stupid. And after some questionable legal elements in terms of who owns the hard drive at this point, you purchase the landfill site to get your wallet back. And you'll need to dig up the landfill and find that hard drive if you want the riches that the wallet has. Now, those in the crypto sphere will be like, wait, it's a digital asset. Why would it be in the landfill? Let's assume the credentials for the wallet is on the hard drive or something like that. It's not really important. It's providing context for the gameplay. Regardless of the reason, you need to dig, and dig to find it. And you do this with a vacuum cleaner. A powerful vacuum cleaner, but a vacuum cleaner nonetheless. But like any mining type operation, this isn't going to be cheap to find those resources, and you didn't exactly have a lot of money after buying the landfill. So in order to fund it, you'll need to take the items that you find while sucking up the dirt and sell them. It'll seemingly be randomly distributed items throughout the playable area, ranging from garbage that somehow sells for $1 to iron ore that somehow doesn't jam up the shop vac because reasons. The controls are simple. You can suck things up by pointing at an area and hitting left mouse click and holding. The vacuum does have a range on it. It will indicate if things that you're pointing at are out of range and can overheat, but it doesn't do a good job with the audio cues on that. But keep it in mind. You could also right click and take the dirt that you've gotten and make dirt piles. But more on that use later. Now, your vacuum does have a limit of how much dirt and valuables it can suck up at one time. So you'll need to periodically go back to the laptop, that's right here by the way, to sell those items and get rid of your dirt. And this is where you can also upgrade your vacuum for the gameplay loop. This of course ranges from the strength of the vacuum, how much dirt it's grabbing and how fast, the amount of dirt it can hold and the items you can sell, the amount of items you can sell, and even secondary items such as lamps and pingers, which will show you the sellable items in the range of that ping. The loop here is simple. Dig some more, get items, upgrade yourself, and repeat. The general gameplay loop follows other standards in the genre, such as Power Wash Simulator and Viscera Cleanup Detail. What makes this a little different from others in the genre is that there's something that you'll need to watch out for, and that's getting around, specifically down and up the hole. You don't have a jetpack or anything. If you dig yourself down, you need to figure out how to get yourself back up. Now, luckily, there is a rope in the middle of the dig site that can be extended with upgrades, mind you, and will allow you to make your way back up to the surface quickly, if you can get to it. There's also the fact that you can take fall damage in this game, and that can happen in a variety of ways, obviously falling into the hole, but if you go up the rope and get enough speed, you can actually launch yourself and actually take a good amount of damage from it. It's sort of hilarious. Part of me wishes that the rope functionality sort of was introduced halfway through the actual experience. I actually liked the idea more of, making the tunnels so that you would have to think about how you moved from place to place. in the early going, there are cars that you can actually use as platforms, and before I realized that the rope was so essential, I was using those as my platforms, going to 1 to 2 to 3 so that I didn't take fall damage. And that was cool. Figuring out those kind of solutions was cool. Then I realized the rope would allow me to just sort of drop at any rate that I wanted as long as I hit jump just before I hit the bottom, and that sort of went out the window. So, with all that said, how is the gameplay loop from an enjoyment angle? Well, let me put it this way. There is a set of players out there that will absolutely love this game. You know who you are. You're the kind of player who played Viscera Cleanup Detail and did almost every level and never got bored of it. This game has a certain monotony to it. It has a certain element where you're doing the same thing over and over again. Yes, the game does pace some of the changes out in terms of, introducing new items or something a little bit different. But in the end, you are just, getting dirt over and over again. And you enjoy that. It's a stress reliever to you. And those players will really enjoy this game. Because, yeah, I will admit, I was a little bit stressed out going into this game, and it was a good calming tool. There is a simplicity in it. Grabbing dirt, grabbing items, upgrading, doing the same thing, and just having fun. And when the game does something a little bit different or unexpected, I really did like what the game had to offer. One of the biggest examples is the lighting system. See, if you dig in a way where light really can't get to the location you are, the game will make it impossible for you to see. Now, you can string lights that you buy on there and put them in the right locations so that you can see and make more progress. And I do like the fact that the game realizes that you could just put a light in front of you and then, maybe pick it up. And so it makes it so that your vacuum, if on, will suck up the light so that you can't just buy one. I like that idea. I like the fact that if you're on top of it, you're going to have problems with that lighting system. And just putting the lights in the most considerate areas, the most areas that it can, give you the coverage you need without, overemphasizing that area. There's an element of strategy to that. There's an element that I really enjoy. In particular, I like the fact that when you find an opening in the ground, you find a hole that is a little bit hollow, there is a darkness to it that makes you a little bit uneasy, makes you a little bit like, oh, I don't know what is in there. And even though the game's not going to throw, something crazy at you, you do pause for a second. Those are some good moments in the game. When the game also flips things on its head, it also gets very interesting. There's a point where you will dig down and you will get to an area where you have these lines of dirt, where everything else is sort of hollow with the exception of the circumference of the big circle that you're digging in. And you can't just dig down in that case. You may not have the rope that will be able to go down so that you can get back up, aka it's not long enough. And if you dig down without thinking, you'll be stuck at the bottom. You'll have to go to the edge and sort of dig your way back up and also, push dirt so that you can get to those platforms. But if you think about it and actually, dig sort of in the right way, you can get the items in question and you can get through the area. It was a great change of pace and it really did help extend the game. However, that's also my biggest problem with the game, that it doesn't really take the next step to really expand itself. And like I said, there are one-off elements that I do like in theory, like the giant worm. There's a giant worm that will come at you at times, but I will admit, it just is an annoyance. It doesn't necessarily do a lot, and the fact is that it's not queued up and it isn't scary from a presentation standpoint, so it doesn't hit very hard. But those kind of changes in terms of, oh, I have to deal with this new threat, I wanted to see more of that, because those are few and far between. And that also leads me to one of the biggest complaints that I think other people will have with this game: the game's length. Sure, it says 4 hours of playtime when I hit the first credits, but I would say that it is more like 2 hours and 30 minutes, and that's with having found a majority of the special items. It doesn't help that the game isn't randomized. At least from restarting quickly and doing the first 20 minutes, I didn't see that much randomization. In fact, I think it was the same map. And even a little bit of randomization would have gone a long way there. It's the little details in terms of extra systems that really don't do it for me here. There's a casino, for example, that I don't understand why it's here. Yeah, you can bet your coins, you can earn more money, you can get free spins, but really, it's taking away from the game in terms of like the main idea. It's not a secondary system. Everything is about earning money, so it just feels like a distraction to me. I don't know how to put it otherwise. And I also wish that the reward system was a little bit more creative. Like, the game will unlock different heads for your vacuum in terms of colors if you find different item types or locations, which is great. At least the first time. Yeah, a different vacuum head color was cool, but when the fifth reward is basically another head color, no, it's not working. Like, how about a pattern on it? How about maybe a little keychain to put on it to make it look unique? I understand there's no cosmetics in terms of the character because it's a first-person game, but I feel like they could have done more in terms of a reward system. The item system also feels sort of tacked on in terms of usable items. There are some useful ones, like a battery that will make it super powered for the vacuum for like 10 seconds. But then there's things like giving you a 25% off discount at the store. That sounds great. By the way, you have to use it immediately. I mean, it uses itself immediately, even if you're down in the pit. So now you have to rush back up, and maybe you have money to use it, maybe you don't. Especially the first time you find it, it sort of feels like, why did you do this? Why couldn't I use this like an item? It's little decisions like that make me question, like, hey, did this go through, like, user testing? Like, I feel like users would tell you that that didn't feel good. That didn't feel good from a usage perspective. Now, you may hear that I have a bunch of little complaints, and they do add up over time. And it definitely does not have a replayability, at least in my opinion. But I want to emphasize something before moving on to the next section. The game was enjoyable. The game did not anger me. It did not get me to a point where it was like, I don't want to play anymore. I just enjoyed playing it in terms of a relaxation, in terms of de-stressing. It's just that I feel like with the right changes and the right additions, maybe with DLC, maybe with some mods or something like that, it could be taken to the next level, because the idea of digging this hole and making the problems and the solutions that you have, there is depth to that, and there's a lot of depth to that, very similar to, well, creative games like Minecraft. And if given the right, scenarios, it could be taken to that next level. So yeah, do I think the game has a lot it could improve? Yes. Is it still worth the price? Well, you'll find out at the end of the video, but let me tell you, it was worth my time. Let's move on to the presentation. One Man's Trash isn't exactly the most good-looking of 3D games, even at the highest settings. Even in the indie space, mind you. Don't get me wrong, the game isn't necessarily ugly, but the default dirt, for example, does feel like it could have a little bit more texture work done to it to make it pop. It becomes apparent really with also repeated items that you grab, not really having any sort of variation to them or uniqueness to them. They have okay patterns, but nothing I want to keep on looking at. On top of that, I will admit that even though there's an obvious central art style that seems to apply to most everything here, there were situations where I was like, wait, is that an asset from an engine pack? When something stuck out a little bit too much. The iron ores really came to mind on this. Which, there's nothing wrong with that, mind you. The assets packs are there for things like that. But I admit, there were times where things felt a little bit too out of place. With that said, I did like the actual animation and seeing the dirt and environment change when vacuuming up the dirt. This itself was the highlight of the presentation in my mind, which may sound weird on the surface, but it's noticing how the earth pulls apart and how there's a satisfaction to seeing the surface change. Very similar to watching those satisfying videos for stress relief on YouTube. It's hypnotic in a way, and does vary on how you approach the position angle-wise. So yeah, it's actually the best part of the presentation, hands down, and is something that oddly kept me at peace, which, given everything that's going on in my life lately, yeah, really helped. I will say, however, that the UI is very bare bones, and really could have used a little bit of touch of style to add to it so that it's nice to look at after a while. Now, it gets the information across, mind you, and you don't want too much attention on it. You want to pay attention to the actual game you're playing, but things like the items on the top when you get them, it feels very mechanical and not in a good way. You know, maybe items with a little bit more price could have been a little bit presented differently. Position-wise on the UI, everything makes sense here, so at least there's that. Like I also mentioned in the gameplay section, lighting here is well done when it plays a part in the exploration in particular, and does add to the ambiance, especially when coming across a hollow section. The whole feels ominous and does add to a sense of mystery and a little bit of fear. Not too much, just a little bit. Even with my problems with the visual presentation, I will say that it never got in the way of gameplay in terms of my overall enjoyment. But I will not say that with the sound design. Let's be clear, the game's sound design, in my opinion, is rather bare bones. Sure, you get the sound of the vacuum struggling and vacuuming things up, you'll hear that a good amount of the time, and there's alright sound with things like overheating or even fall damage and the oomph that comes out. Nothing to write home about, they aren't great, but they do give you information and they can work. But it's things that go beyond the normal things. Like, if I'm vacuuming a thing up, anyone who has used a vacuum, or in particular a shop vac, will know that you will get some weird sounds, especially if you're vacuuming up some odd or different things. Here, no. It's just the standard sound, or something that really doesn't express the sound of the item you're vacuuming up, just sort of that sucking sound. I didn't notice the difference between vacuuming up a garbage bag versus a propane tank. Trust me, they would have two different sounds just from the material they are in them. And that actually serves a purpose gameplay-wise too. Knowing that you're getting items of, like, you know, a metal sound means, oh, I'm getting propane tanks. That sort of just registers in your brain. Look, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's bad sound design, but if the sound design is supposed to be enhancing the gameplay experience, this isn't really doing it. Just take a listen and hear what I'm talking about. As to the music, I mean, it works, I suppose. There's a selection of tracks that work from a background noise while working level, And I won't say that I got sick of them. Yes, I did put on a YouTube video and my own music after the, first half of the game, but it's not like I got sick of them to the point where I wanted to turn them off. They're just sort of, not necessarily elevator music, but the sort of, I'm exploring kind of music, a little bit different. They did go through a couple of different styles, I'll give them that, but rather just take a listen and hear what I'm talking about. As to the last part of the game, the story, yeah. Remember how I said there was an initial setup? Well, in terms of concrete story events, that's about all you're going to get. Which, I admit, I was expecting a little more detail, like maybe finding a written note on the ground, explaining things, or something along that line, some lore. Instead, most everything else story-wise is done with environmental storytelling. And well, that doesn't do a whole lot to extend the story. I mean, yes, there are train cars in the ground, and I can try to figure out why, but it also doesn't really give you a lot to go off of. I mean, it's great for theory crafting, trying to figure out exactly what's going on, but I admit it never really approached my mind in terms of being important, or at least keeping a focus on it. Now, I did enjoy some of the references that were made, like the Atari 2600 ET game reference, and there's a couple of nods to nostalgia and pop culture, but nothing too crazy in the end. And really, I felt like, especially with the items, they could have gone a little further in terms of that. They could have gone a little bit crazier, or told the story specifically to the person digging these things up. It's one of those stories that you don't really want to think about too much. I mean, after you've taken out your 100th VCR DVD player from this pit, you're thinking, why the hell is there so many DVD players here? In the end, the weird part about my conclusion of One Man's Trash is that despite me having a lot of criticisms of details behind the implementation, things like lacking sound design and needing a little bit more oomph from the gameplay, I'm not going to sit here and say that I didn't enjoy my time. In fact, I will say that it probably was the game I needed right now. My dad is going through some shit right now, I'll just put it as that. And chaos is at work, the world in general is just a dumpster fire. The game gave me an escape for a period of time that sometimes I really don't get when reviewing a game. It let me shut down my brain at points and just relax. And the fact is, it was doing something right if it was doing that. Does it have the lasting power of games like Power Wash Simulator? No. Does it have the replayability of things like Viscera cleanup detail? No. Does it have some things that made me go, okay, that's fun? Yes. Do I wish it was longer? Yes. Do I wish it had different playable areas? Yes. Do I think the price for the game is perfectly reasonable? Yes. Do I think it's worth buying? Yes. But does it fully stand out in the genre? No. But it does earn a 74 out of 100, making it a niche buy, specifically buyable for those who love the genre right now, but others may wait for a sale if they are really hurting for cash, or may want to buy something else that's a little bit more up their alley. But that doesn't take into account my enhancer system, which takes the more subjective element of games and tries to match a game to you. If you fall into one of the following categories on screen, add or subtract that score to your main score. If the first digit of your score changes, refer to this chart to see if the game lies in the buyability rating for you. And as you can see, certain people are really going to like this game. Granted, I do think with the right adjustments, especially if you can make some new maps, yeah, absolutely, this would be fantastic for a lot of people, but to each their own. And I mean, really, it's not that expensive of a game. Anyway, that's it for this review. If you liked it, hit that like button, subscribe, all that jazz. Or, tell a friend, especially if they like these types of games. As to what I will be reviewing next, I don't know. You can join the Discord and I will post the games that I'm looking at, but it will probably be another indie game because, well, the indie game channel. As to my review of 100 Line, I think I'm going to do something different. The fact is that game is, well, if you're looking for a recommendation, go out and buy it now. If it was a scoreable system, it would get a 98 right now. And that's only because it has certain elements that certain people are not going to like, even from a objective standpoint. It is a sort of out there game. But with that said, it is my game of the year by far. Haven't played Expedition 33, haven't played Donkey Kong Bonanza or whatever it is, but that game is everything that I love about that creator, and specifically the evolution of that creator. So that is probably a review in itself. But that's it for me for now. And as always, keep on gaming and digging. Dig a hole.